In 2010, my friend Raj and I made two very different investment decisions. He put $40,000 down on a rental property. I put the same $40,000 into the stock market and I kept investing $400 each month. Raj used leveraged and I used time and compounding. Today, 16 years later in 2026, we compared everything. Property appreciation, mortgage payoff, rent, repairs, vacancies, taxes, and every dollar my stock portfolio had earned. So who built more wealth? The landlord or the index fund investor? The answer surprised both of us. In 2010, I was 27-year-old, making around $80,000 a year. My friend worked at the same company, Raj, same salary, pretty much the same age, but completely different investing philosophy. He had just finished reading Rich Dad Poor Dad and he was super inspired to build his rental empire. I was getting introduced to index fund listening to Dave Ramsey. So Raj bought a 3-bedroom rental property in our neighborhood for around $200,000. He put the standard 20% down, that's roughly $40,000, and financed the rest with a 30-year mortgage at around 6% interest rate. His monthly mortgage payment was around $1,369. He rented the house out for around $1,700 a month, leaving him about $331 per month in cash flow. Now this was before maintenance, vacancies, and any unexpected repairs. So on paper, it looked like a fantastic investment. My path was very different. Now, instead of buying a rental property, I took roughly the same $40,000 and invested in the total US stock market index fund. And to keep this comparison as fair as possible, let's assume I invested $400 each month into the same index fund. In reality, I invested much more than that, but we'll stick to $400. So we are comparing apples to apples. So we both believed that we had picked the smarter path. Now, since Raj and I used to work at the same company during our lunch breaks or coffee breaks, Raj was always the center of attention. He had a new story to tell every week. My tenant just renewed the lease. I made another $300 this month. The property's value has gone up by this much thousand or this much hundred. My tenant is basically paying off my mortgage and all sort of stories. He loved explaining how his $40,000 down payment was buying a $200,000 asset. For people who were just getting started with investing, Raj sounded like an expert, right? Me, I had nothing to talk about my investments, right? Every month, another $400 quietly moved from my bank account into a total US stock market index fund. That's about it. No tenants, no cash flow, no exciting stories, no rental property to drive by, just a brokerage account statement each month. Whenever Raj came to check on his rental, he would stop by my house and say, bro, you should have bought one with me. The market is really going up. The cash flow is great. And honestly, at that point, he looked like a clear winner, right? At least that's what we all thought. By end of 2012, Raj had collected around $61,200 in total rent. The total mortgage payment was around $49,284. Positive cash flow was around $11,916. On paper, it sounded great, right? Until you subtract these costs. Property taxes did not stay $2,500 a year. They kept increasing by roughly 4.6% every year. Same with insurance premiums as well. Then one summer, the HVAC system failed, another $1,000. This property was in Kansas City and it was hit by Kansas tornado. Damaged part of the roof, another $3,100. Then came every landlord's nightmare. The tenant moved out. The house sat vacant for around 3 months, costing him about $5,100 in lost rent. Before the next tenant moved in, the house had to be cleaned, carpet replaced, and the property advertised again, adding a few $1,000s more. Raj was a pretty good handyman, so instead of paying contractors, he paid with his time. So on paper, his rental was supposed to generate $331 a month. That is almost $11,916 of cash flow over 3 years. But after repairs, vacancies, turnover cost, high property taxes, and insurance, his actual cash flow was closer to $3,000 to $4,000 over these 3 years. And we still haven't put a dollar value on the hundreds of hours he spent managing the property. For me, on the other hand, investing was honestly pretty boring. I started with the same $40,000. Over the next 3 years, I invested around $14,400, about $400 each month. That brought my total investment to about $54,400. To keep things simple, let's assume the total US stock market return around 10% per year. By the end of 3 years, my portfolio had grown to about $70,640. That's it. Every month, the money simply left my paycheck and quietly bought more shares. Everything was automated. But the interesting part is Raj was still ahead. You know why? Because of one word: leverage. But because he controlled a much larger asset with a relatively small down payment. That's the power of leverage. So after 3 years, even after all the repairs, the vacancies, the late night maintenance, and everything else, Raj still looked like the winner. Did he? Looking back, Raj made one mistake that almost every first-time rental investors make. He thought his rental was generating $331 a month. But that's only true if nothing ever goes wrong. That's why experienced investors keep a maintenance reserve. A common rule of thumb is to set aside roughly 1 month's rent every year for future repairs, maintenance, and vacancies. If you are not budgeting for these costs, your cash flow is not going to be $331 a month. 7 years later, Raj wasn't a rookie landlord anymore. He had become much better at screening tenants, handling repairs, and managing the property. His rent had increased from $1,700 to about $1,850 a month. Property taxes and insurance had gone up too, but so had his rental income. Then another big expense showed up. The roof had reached the end of its life. Another $7,500. Another thing I learned from watching Raj's journey was about cash on cash returns. You'll often hear people online casually talking about 15 to 20%, even higher on cash returns. Raj's number told a very different story. After accounting for vacancies, repairs, maintenance, and the rising expenses, his returns were close to 4 to 6%. Nowhere near the numbers social media loves to advertise. And despite all of that, leverage was still quietly doing its job. Every mortgage payment increased his equity. Every year the property appreciated a little more. But my portfolio had entered a completely different phase. Remember, I wasn't doing anything fancy. I had just started with $40,000 and simply kept investing $400 every month into the same fund. By end of year 7, my portfolio had quietly grown to about $125,000. It's painfully slow in the beginning, and then almost without you noticing, the curve starts bending upwards. For the first time, it felt like my money was working harder than I was. Fast forward another 3 years, Raj's rental had appreciated to about $313,000. His mortgage balance has dropped to roughly $134,000. That gave him almost $179,000 in equity. Along the way, the property had also consumed roughly $25,000 to $30,000 in repairs, maintenance, vacancies, insurances, increases, and other ownership costs. But despite all of that, Raj had built real wealth. This is important. Those expenses did not mean that real estate was a bad investment. They were simply the cost of owning a productive asset. My portfolio at the same time had crossed an important milestone. By year 10, it had grown to about $183,695,000. Here's what surprised me. Out of that amount, I had personally invested only about $88,000. The remaining $95,695,000 had come purely from market growth and compounding. For the first time, my investment had made more money than I had contributed myself. At this point, the real question was no longer which investment had fewer headaches. The real question had become which one was creating more wealth. And then 2020 happened. COVID turned the entire world upside down. The stock market crashed, and then came one of the fastest recovery in the history. At the same time, home prices across America went on an incredible run, and suddenly both of our investments started accelerating. Raj's rental appreciated faster than ever. My portfolio grew faster than ever. And neither of us predicted COVID. Neither of us knew interest would fall to a historic lows. Neither of us knew both the housing and the stock market would take off. Now, one quick note here before I show you the final numbers. I intentionally used long-term average stock market returns for my portfolio. I wanted this comparison to be as fair as possible. So, 16 years later, here was the final score. Raj's rental had grown into over $400,000 of equity. My portfolio had grown to $364,000. What's even more interesting is out of that $364,000, I had personally invested only $117,000. The remaining $247,000 came purely from market growth and compounding. Now, who do you think won? Honestly, I don't think there was a wrong choice here. Raj built more wealth by using leverage. I built wealth through the power of compounding. His investment demanded more of his time, and mine demanded more of patience. Neither of us got rich because we picked the perfect investment. We built wealth because we bought productive assets, kept investing, and gave them 16 years to do their job. Most people spend their lives trying to predict the next Nvidia or the next real estate boom. Very few people simply stay invested long enough to experience one. If this comparison has changed the way you think about investing, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And in the comments, I want to know which path would you have chosen in 2010, Raj's rental property or my index fund portfolio, and the reason for it. I'd love to read your thoughts. Your finance friend Sushant, signing off.